Normally, when someone enters a place like this, the first question is inevitable. Who could have done all of this? The answer seems obvious. Michelangelo. But the real mystery is not who, it's how. Did he paint it standing? Did he paint it lying on his back? Did he really work alone on something this enormous? In today's video, we explore the hidden story behind the Sistine Chapel ceiling and answer one of the most debated questions in art history. How was Michelangelo physically and mentally able to paint one of the greatest masterpieces ever created? Michelangelo Buonarroti was not born a legend. He was born in Caprese, near Arezzo, in Tuscany, and raised in Florence, the beating heart of the Renaissance. From an early age, he was immersed in humanist education, studying grammar and classical ideas under Francesco Balbino. At just 13 years old, he became an apprentice in the workshop of Domenico Ghirlandaio, one of Florence's most respected painters. His talent was so evident that Ghirlandaio personally recommended him to Lorenzo de' Medici, the most powerful patron in Florence. This connection would shape Michelangelo's entire worldview. Between 1490 and 1492, Michelangelo studied at the Medici Humanist Academy, absorbing Neoplatonic philosophy, the idea that beauty, truth, and God were deeply connected. But everything changed after the death of Lorenzo de' Medici. Florence fell into political and religious chaos under Savonarola, and Michelangelo found himself without protection, without commissions, and without stability. After periods in Venice and Bologna, he returned to Florence, only to find no work waiting for him. This forced him to make a decision that would change art history forever. In 1496, Michelangelo moved to Rome under the protection of Cardinal Raffaele Riario. There, his reputation exploded. By 1504, back in Florence, he completed David, carved from a block of marble that other artists had abandoned. The sculpture instantly became a symbol of artistic perfection, human potential, and political power. Michelangelo was no longer just a talented artist. He was the artist. And that reputation reached the ears of a man who feared no one. In 1505, Pope Julius II summoned Michelangelo to Rome, first to build his tomb, then, unexpectedly, to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo refused. He was a sculptor, not a painter, and painting a massive curved ceiling felt like a trap, possibly designed by rivals to humiliate him. But Julius II was not a negotiator. He was a commander. Legend says he once struck Michelangelo with his cane for arguing. Eventually, Michelangelo accepted, fully aware that failure would be eternal. The original contract was modest: paint the 12 apostles and some decorative elements. Michelangelo rejected the plan almost immediately. Instead, he chose something radically ambitious. He decided to cover nearly 800 square meters with an entirely new visual universe, transforming the ceiling into a monumental narrative of creation, fall, and redemption. This was not decoration. This was theology, philosophy, and anatomy combined. And he would do it almost entirely alone. Painting fresco is brutal. The plaster must be prepared daily. Each section must be painted before it dries. Mistakes are permanent. Now imagine doing all of that 20 meters above the ground, looking upward day after day. Michelangelo designed a special scaffold suspended from the walls, not from the floor, and worked constantly with his head tilted back. His neck deteriorated, his vision blurred, his body broke down. In a letter, he drew himself bent backward, paint dripping onto his face. This was not romantic suffering, it was physical punishment. But beyond the physical pain, the constant strain, and the almost inhuman technical challenge, there is something even more extraordinary about the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Its deeper meaning. This is not simply a collection of beautiful images. It is not decoration. It is not just a display of artistic skill. Michelangelo was telling the entire story of humanity, from its creation to its fall. and ultimately to its hope for redemption. At the center of the ceiling, the 9 scenes from the book of Genesis are not placed randomly. They begin with the creation of the universe, the separation of light from darkness, and gradually move toward human fragility, sin, punishment, and suffering. It is a visual journey from the divine to the deeply human. And this is where Michelangelo completely breaks with tradition. God is not depicted as distant or untouchable. He is powerful, dynamic, almost physical, moving with an energy never before seen in religious art. In the most famous scene, the creation of Adam, God does not touch Adam. Instead, Michelangelo captures a suspended moment, an eternal tension between 2 fingers that almost meet. It is life on the verge of beginning, and at the same time, a reminder of separation. Many art historians believe that the tiny gap between those fingers symbolizes something far deeper: human free will, the distance between creator and creation, or the responsibility mankind carries for its own existence. The ignudi, the nude figures that do not directly belong to the biblical narrative, reinforce this idea. They represent the beauty and perfection of the human body, but also its vulnerability. Humanity is noble and fragile. What Michelangelo achieves here is extraordinary. He merges Christian theology with Renaissance humanist philosophy without conflict. God remains divine, but humanity is elevated, complex, and worthy of being portrayed with the highest artistic dignity. Nothing on this ceiling is accidental. Every gesture, every muscle, every expression was carefully designed to communicate meaning beyond the paint itself. And once you understand this, the Sistine Chapel stops being just a masterpiece. It becomes a visual meditation on who we are, where we come from, and what we are meant to become. When people stand beneath the Sistine Chapel ceiling today, they often fall silent, not because they fully understand what they are seeing, but because something inside them feels overwhelmed. The scale, the beauty, the sense that this was made by someone who touched something beyond the ordinary. But what history often forgets to show is the loneliness behind that greatness. For more than 4 years, Michelangelo lived trapped between stone walls and a wooden scaffold, separated from the world below. While Rome continued its daily life, his days blurred into endless cycles of plaster, pigment, pain, and prayer. He was not surrounded by applause. He was not celebrated while he worked. Most of the time, he was alone with his thoughts. And those thoughts were heavy. Michelangelo constantly questioned himself. He feared that the figures would not live up to the expectations placed upon him. He feared that the Pope's confidence was misplaced. And most of all, he feared that once the work was revealed, it would expose not his genius, but his limitations. Physically, his body began to fail him. His neck stiffened until looking forward felt unnatural. His eyes swelled from staring upward for hours, forcing paint and dust into his face. There were moments when his vision became so distorted that he could barely read letters held in front of him. Yet stopping was never an option. Not because someone stood over him with authority, but because Michelangelo believed that abandoning the work would mean betraying his purpose. In letters to friends, his words are filled with exhaustion and bitterness. He speaks of hunger, of isolation, of a life reduced to survival. He ate simple food, slept little, and rejected comfort as if suffering itself were part of the contract. And still, day after day, he returned to the ceiling. What makes this sacrifice so powerful is that Michelangelo did not believe he was creating something perfect. He believed he was chasing something impossible, an image worthy of God, created by imperfect human hands. That tension between the divine ideal and human limitation lives inside every figure on the ceiling. And perhaps that is why we feel so deeply moved when we see it. Because beneath the beauty, we recognize the truth. Greatness is rarely glamorous. It is quiet. It is painful. It demands everything before it gives anything back. Michelangelo's ceiling is not only a story from the book of Genesis. It is the story of a man who chose to endure, even when no one was watching. And in that choice, he achieved something that transcends art. He left behind a reminder that the most meaningful creations are born not from comfort, but from commitment, sacrifice, and an unwavering belief that the struggle itself matters. When Michelangelo finally stepped down from the scaffold, he did not celebrate. There was no sense of victory, only exhaustion. For years, his world had been reduced to stone walls, wooden planks, and a ceiling that demanded everything he had. When the work was revealed, people saw perfection, but Michelangelo saw only what it had cost him. And yet, centuries later, that sacrifice still speaks. The Sistine Chapel ceiling is not admired simply because of its beauty. It endures because it represents something deeper. The moment when human effort reaches toward the divine, knowing it will never fully arrive, but reaching anyway. This is why the image of God extending his finger toward Adam has become universal. It is not just about creation. It is about aspiration, about the distance between what we are and what we are capable of becoming. Michelangelo's story reminds us that greatness is not the result of comfort, talent, or inspiration alone. It is built through discipline, doubt, and the willingness to continue when the work becomes unbearable. In a world obsessed with speed, shortcuts, and instant results, the Sistine Chapel stands as a quiet rebellion. It asks a dangerous question. What could you create if you were willing to give it everything? Not for applause, not for recognition, but because the work itself demands it. If this video changed the way you see art, history, or human potential, support the channel by liking this video. It helps more than you think. Subscribe for more deep art analysis, hidden history, and the stories behind humanity's greatest creations. And now, tell us in the comments, do you believe masterpieces like this are still possible today? Or was Michelangelo the product of a time that no longer exists? Your perspective completes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.